こんにちは、ハリケーンフットボールです。本日の教材はブライトンの三笘薫に関する動画です。ブライトンは今シーズン25試合を戦い、現在9位に位置していますが、三笘薫は6ゴール、3アシストと、まずまずの成績だと思いますが、ここ数試合のパフォーマンスを見れば、調子が上がっているのが明らかにわかると思います。それでもセンセーショナルなプレミアデビューを果たしたプレミア挑戦の最初のシーズンは、チームがクラブ最高の6位でフィニッシュし、初のヨーロッパリーグの出場も決めたことから、チームとしても素晴らしいシーズンとなり、さらに2年目のシーズンとなった去年は、腰の怪我によって、シーズンの後半を離脱してしまい、今シーズンは、チームとしても三笘個人としても、開幕スタートの絶好調から、一時期少し失速したように見えましたが、直近ではまた調子を戻しているような波に感じます。今回はアダム・マクドナルドのチャンネルで、このチャンネルでは初めて、視聴者からの Q&A に答えるという動画の中で、三笘は1年目のシーズンよりも今シーズンの方が良いシーズンとなり得るのか、という質問に答えている部分を切り取っています。チームの状況や、1年目の衝撃的なデビューも含めて、単純に比較するのが難しいといった感じですが、ブライトンの近年の成長や日本人のファンが増えていることにも喜んでいますので、実際にどのように答えているのか、チェックしてみましょう。
Okay, so next question from you guys is from Joma-JQ5QJ. God, you guys don't have nice simple usernames, but thank you so much for your question, Joma. Your question is, do you think this season's Mitoma performance is better than his first season? I think it's a really good question. I think it probably is. I think probably it is. I think if we look at stats completely, I think in Mitoma's first season he got 7 goals and 5 assists. I looked this up, and this season he's already got 6 goals and 3 assists as well. So he's on track. If he continues, we're probably 2/3 of the way through the season now, maybe just slightly under that, maybe 60% of the way through the season. He's essentially there. He probably will break that this season if he continues with the form, he doesn't get an injury, etc., etc. I think for me, that first season with Mitoma will always be so heady for me because it was his first season. It was the first time in a long time that we'd seen a player like him. And really, I think Brighton, apart from when I spoke about Anthony Knockout in the last video, I think similar in the sense that they've got that game-changing ability. They can get us up the pitch literally by themselves. They can weave in and out of players. It was the first time I'd seen a player like that at the Amex in a long time. And in the Premier League, you rarely see players like that who are so graceful in terms of their dribbling and stuff. So that first season was so exciting to see him because it felt like such a different type of winger. We had Trossard, who was a bit of a forward, bit of a winger, kind of that classic kind of, probably would be a fantastic kind of Pep Guardiola winger, obviously doing so well in the Arteta system. So actually, a very different style to Mitoma, who's more of a kind of get off your seat kind of winger. And not as much of a goal scorer, to be honest. Like, one of my criticisms about Mitoma is that actually, for all of his fantastic build-up play and his ability to get us up the field, and I've spoken about it before on this channel, I don't think it's an amazing goal scorer. He's not a goal-scoring winger. Although this season we're seeing that he's always, for Brighton, come up in clutch moments, in the big moments. But it's not necessarily been a consistent thing. I think with that first season of Mitoma, which was 22-23, 2 seasons ago, it was the season that De Zerbi came in. We lost Graham Potter to Chelsea. There was so much of that passion in the season and the heartbreak and then the elation of De Zerbi coming in and what he did. Obviously getting us into a European position, finishing 6th, getting Europe for the first time in the club's history. Only kind of 6-7 seasons into a Premier League journey ever. It was so amazing. And the role Mitoma played in that season, I think, I'm trying to remember who was that the season Mark Cucurella? No, it would have been the season after that. Maybe who won it that season? Did Dunk maybe win player of the season, or Alexis McAllister or Caicedo? I think it might have been Caicedo. I can't actually remember. One player of the season. So many fantastic performances. But that team, I think in everyone's mind will be the greatest Brighton team in terms of quality to have ever played. I think in terms of the players we've got now, technically we maybe could, on paper, have a better team now, but I think in terms of the greatness they achieved, that team will go down in history. And I think looking back on Mitoma's season then, it was amazing. He scored goals. He woke the league up to this unbelievable player who was fantastic on the eye, who could score goals, who could do something that very few players can do by dribbling so easily and gracefully. And I think In terms of numbers, I think we're probably going to see a better season for Mitoma this season in terms of more goals being scored. However, in the long term, which one will we look back on as being better? I think that'll be interesting. I think the nostalgia effect for many Brighton fans might mean that people say the original Mitoma, if you know what I mean, was kind of a bit better. He was still very good last season, to be honest. I think he had a very good season, admittedly. It was just a bit more difficult for everyone. He had an injury, didn't he, for a while, and we had the Dingra relying on him a bit more. By the way, I think he'll be feeling a bit hard done by at the moment with his lack of minutes. So yeah, I don't know. I think if you had to really press me for an answer, I think this season, let's say this season, because he's going to break his goal record, he's going to break his assist record, and we could still do something very, very special in getting Europe again this season. So I'm going to go out on a bit of a reach here, and I'm going to say Mitoma's season this season is better than his first season. Let me know in the comments though, what do you think? Do you agree with that? I'd love to know your thoughts. Do you think I'm being is this a bit of recency bias coming in? I've tried to think about that deeply, so let me know what you think. Okay, next question. This is from Ludwig Olsen. Thank you so much for your question, Ludwig. I feel like the problem with our struggles against lesser teams is that we don't have a way to break up a low block. How do you think Herzler will change this? Ludwig, mate, I think if we had the answer to this question, Brighton would be top of the Premier League, because this is the age-old question for Brighton, and this has been something they've struggled with for a couple of seasons now. It's definitely been something we've seen massively this season. You think back to the Southampton at home game. You think back to Wolves at home. There have been plenty of others that are escaping my mind right now. They've been, I spoke about this. I put a clip out of it on Shorts. I put it on Twitter as well. My Twitter page, if you don't already follow it, Seagull Central. About how actually I think Brighton, we all know this, Brighton play better when they're up against a team who are coming on to us a bit more and actually are prepared to have a bit more of an open game and have possession themselves, because what it means is they'll sit on the halfway line and we can have Mitoma and Minte literally running on the shoulder of the last defender, getting into those massive spaces and creating problems. We find it a lot more difficult when teams come to the Amex 2 banks of 4 and then sit back, camped in their final third, in their defensive third, and we're just forced to literally sweep it from left to right, knock it about, trying to find those little incisive moments. It's a lot harder. And I think the thing we've struggled with is finding that incision. I think maybe losing a player like Pascal Gross in the summer was big to that, because, when you're at the Amex, anywhere really, and a team is sitting back, rarely, it happens a bit less often away from home, because I think the opposing team, if they're at home, would play a bit more of an expansive game. But it's often at the Amex where we'll see 2 banks of 4. It's a lot harder because you need players. I think a lot of our system has been based on, particularly under De Zerbi, it was based on bringing the pressure onto us. We require a team to press us so we can play through them and get into those spaces when they've committed forward. And actually, it's a lot more difficult when they don't do that. A player like Pascal Gross was great because he could turn the key. He had the key. He could make those little incisive passes. He could see the vision. I think probably someone like Matt O'Reilly's probably quite good at that as well. Mitoma is good at that. He can, I think, having that ability to dribble past players and get into spaces and kind of... You need that moment where basically a team in a back 4 or 2 banks of 4, they're happy from going left, shuffling right, shuffling left, shuffling right, following the ball. Centre-back knocks it that way. Then Brighton knock it back to the other side, back to the other winger. And it's just a constant kind of circular knocking it back around the field, trying to open it up. Actually, sometimes on Mitoma, it's very easy for a defence to just shuffle left, shuffle right, make a block, step up, do what you need to do. But actually, when you've got a player like a Mitoma who can in a moment can just do something that kind of drags a player out of position, opens it up, that's when it's so important. And having a player like Pascal Gross who could just put a ball on a sixpence, do a little gross turn, pull a player out of position. You need those players. You need those moments of play where it's uncomfortable for a defence. Because often, in the low block, it's very easy to just move about. So what it requires, in my opinion, it requires tempo. It requires pace of play. It requires precision in passing. I spoke about it in a previous video, but, I remember Kyle Walker giving an interview around Pep Guardiola in one of his first seasons, saying that actually a big thing for Pep Guardiola was actually the precision of play was something he was huge on. It wasn't massively philosophical the way they played. It was actually about every single pass you make needs to go to the exact position that the player receiving it needs it to. So, it's about having no sloppy passes. when you pass it to a player, it's the exact right pace, it's the exact right speed, it's the exact right position of their foot. Are they running onto it in the exact position? Because it requires that crispness, which means when you're trying to break down teams, everything is so precise. And because when you've got so many defenders around you sitting back, it's so easy for them. If you slightly play a ball a bit wrong or the speed's not right, they can get there. And actually, you need that speed of play to create a bit of mayhem, open it up, be precise with your passing. So I think sometimes we fall into a trap at the Amex in terms of the way we play. In that very simple, just moving it left to right, knocking it about, peppering the goal. And we need a bit more pace sometimes. I think there was a game a few weeks ago, it was at Everton at home, I think, where the pace was just really poor. We were slow with it. It was a bit turgid. We were just knocking it about, peppering the kind of 18-yard box and hoping that something would happen, putting a cross in the box, they'd head it away. You need something quicker, and I think it was crying out for that intensity. So I think in answer to your question, how do you think Hurtsler will change this? How will he specifically change it? I don't know, because obviously I'm not Fabian Hurtsler. I think having more of those playmakers on the pitch is very important. Maybe Matt O'Reilly coming into the side for those games is very important. But I think just building that intensity of play, building that tempo, because it's so easy to fall into that trap of they're just sitting back. We just need to knock it about. That's just we can't actually get through them, so we just need to go from left to right. You need to do more. You need to be quicker. And I think that is how you break down a low block. It's easier said than done, of course. And look, Brighton would have probably 5 to 8 more points this season if they were able to break down a low block, because we have dropped points in games like this before, and it's difficult. So that's my answer on how I think Brighton can break down a low block, but it's easier said than done. Okay, and the final question is from Spoonfed, who I have been looking at in the comments. We've had a few chats in the comments, me and Spoonfed, and Spoonfed's a new fan. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, a US fan. I'd love to know a bit more about you, Spoonfed. If you can get in the comments, let us know your journey, how you came to finding Brighton, where you're from. It's great that Brighton are kind of attracting a new fan base, and I think that it's so funny because for years Brighton have been such a small club, and they still are in the grand scheme of things, a small club in Premier League terms. But the growth they've seen in the last 10, 15 years, going from a team playing at a running track, which had a couple of thousand people able to get in there, to now having a 30,000 seat stadium, playing in Europe, being one of the most impressive sides in the Premier League at times. It's such a journey, having some really, really quality players and having loads of money in the bank. It's such a stark contrast to 20, 15, 25 years ago. And it's great that we've got new fans. I think often some parts of the fan base can be a little bit funny about it, protective. I think, those in a generation older than me who were there for the really, really rough times, where I was probably a little bit too young to experience it as a 25-year-old. My first experiences of Brighton were a season ticket with Dean, where times were tough, but they weren't as tough as they had been. And I think it's difficult. I think for some of the older fans, you see it a lot about being a bit antagonistic towards kind of newer fans. But I think generally, compared to other clubs, I think the Brighton fan base is very good at actually welcoming new fan bases. I think the whole city of Brighton, Spoonfed, I think this is interesting for you to kind of understand, if you're keen to understand a bit more about Brighton as a club and a city, that actually the city itself, it's a very accepting city, an open, a liberal city, a diverse city of people, I think people from all over, this is a bit of a bigger point now, but I think people move here from all over the country as it's a place that people are very accepting of people and mindset, and it's progressive in the way people think. And actually, I think it's one of the most community-based football clubs. It's one of the most supportive and kind of progressive football clubs in terms of a fan base kind of ideology, I think. And I think it's great. We're seeing a lot of Japanese fans in the Amex. I think, the Japan tour as well. I saw so many Brighton fans making friends with Japanese fans out there. It looked like a really great experience. So I know this is your question, but I think it's an interesting conversation to have about the kind of new fans. But you're more than welcome on this channel, Spoonfed. I'm so glad to have you. And if you're a new fan to Brighton generally, if you're not from England and you're joining the content just generally, thank you so much for doing so, and I really appreciate it.
次は解説です。アダムの英語は発音的には綺麗だと思う一方で、話し方がボソボソになることが多いので、そういう意味では上級者レベルに感じますが、一人で話しているということもあって、英語学習には良い教材だと感じますし、毎回のようにそう言っているような気もします。今回も、なかなか便利なボキャブラリーも多くありましたので、本日の解説をチェックしてみましょ
う。Will always be so heady for me.
ヘディは、 興奮させる、刺激的な、有頂天にさせるという意味の形容詞で、ポジティブな意味で使われることが多く、気分が高揚するような体験や強い感情を引き起こすものを表すときに使われます。また、お酒や香りが強烈な、酔わせるようなという意味で使われることもあります。
Will always be so heady for me. Will always be so heady for me. They can weave in and out of players.
weave in and out は人や物の間を巧みにすり抜けるという意味のフレーズで、特にジグザグに動くイメージがあり、スポーツや交通の文脈でよく使われ、例えば、サッカー選手がディフェンダーをかわしながら進むときや、車やバイクが渋滞の中を縫うように走るとき、群衆の中をすり抜けながら進む場合にも使える表現です。
They can weave in and out of players. They can weave in and out of players. They can then the elation of the Zerbi coming in and...
イレーションは大喜び、歓喜、有頂天という意味を持つ名詞で強い幸福感や達成感を伴う喜びを指します。単なる嬉しいや楽しいよりも興奮するほどの喜びや舞い上がるような気持ちを表すニュアンスがあります。特に大きな成功や良い知らせを受けた時の高揚感に対してよく使われ、ハピネスやジョイよりもより強く一時的な高揚感を含むのが特徴的です。
And then the elation of the Zerbi coming in. And then the elation of the Zerbi coming in. Is this a bit of recency bias coming in?
リセンシーバイアスとは、心筋性バイアスのことで、最近の出来事や情報を過大評価し、過去の出来事を過小評価してしまう心理的傾向を指します。これは、投資、スポーツ、ビジネスなどの分野でよく使われる概念です。例えば、最近の株価の動きだけを見て投資判断をする、直近の試合の結果だけで選手の実力を判断する、などの状況で発生します。
Is this a bit of recency bias coming in? Is this a bit of recency bias coming in? And I think the thing we've struggled with is finding that incision.
インシジョンは、切開、切り込み、鋭い切れ味という意味を持つ名詞で、単なる切り込みや切り傷ではなく、意図的で正確な切り込みを指し、主に医学、外科手術の文脈で使われます。メスや鋭利な道具を使って、体の一部を正確に切開することを指し、手術や処置の際に不可欠な技術として重要視されます。また、比喩的に鋭い分析、的確な指摘を表すこともあり、特に学術論文やビジネスの文脈で用いられることがあります。
And I think the thing we've struggled with is finding that incision. And I think the thing we've struggled with is finding that incision because he could turn the key.
turn the key は文字通りの意味では鍵を回すですが、比喩的に重要な役割を果たす、物事を動かす決定的な行動を取るという意味で使われることがあります。特に成功への鍵となる行動やアイデアを指すことが多いです。スポーツやビジネスの文脈では、試合やプロジェクトの流れを変える決定的な要素について話すときに使われます。
Because he could turn the key. Because he could turn the key. He could just put a board on a sixpence.
シックスペンスは、かつてイギリスで使われていた6ペンス硬貨を指し、女シックスペンスは、非常に狭いスペースでという意味で、特にイギリスで使われる表現で、もともとはサッカーで使われるフレーズで、選手が狭いスペースで俊敏に動いたり、正確なパスを出したりする状況を表し、車やバイクが素早く方向転換するときなどにも使われます。アメリカでは、女ダイムが使われます。
You could just put a board on a sixpence. You could just put a board on a sixpence. Was actually the precision of play was something he was huge on it.
ヒュージオンは何かに夢中である。何かを重視するという意味で使われるカジュアルな表現で、特に人の趣味、好み、価値観を強調する際に用いられます。同じような表現にビッグオンがありますが、ヒュージオンの方がさらに強調された表現になります。何かにハマっている、何かを特に好んでいるという意味で使われたり、何かにこだわる、何かを重視するという意味でも使用されます。
Was actually the precision of play was something he was huge on. Was actually the precision of play was something he was huge on it because it requires that crispness.
クリスプネスはパリッとした状態、鮮明さ、キビキビした動きなどを表す名詞です。食べ物の場合にはパリッとした食感を指し、天候や空気の場合には爽やかで冷たい、澄んだ感じを、動作やスポーツの場合にはキビキビしたシャープな動きを、映像、音、文章の場合は鮮明さや明瞭さを指し、あらゆる場面で登場します。共通するニュアンスは、はっきりしている。シャープで心地よいという感覚です。
because it requires that crispness. Because it requires that crispness. And actually, you need that speed of play to create a bit of mayhem.
メーヘムは大混乱、騒動、無秩序という意味の名詞で、特に人々がコントロールを失い、カオスな状況になっている時によく使われ、スポーツ、ニュース、映画、ビジネスなど様々な文脈で登場する単語です。
And actually, you need that speed of play to create a bit of mayhem. And actually, you need that speed of play to create a bit of mayhem. We were slow with it. It was a bit turgid.
タージットは主に物理的な意味と比喩的な意味の2つの意味で使われる形容詞で、物理的な晴れた、膨らんだという意味では水分や空気を含んで膨張した状態を指し、医学、生物学、自然現象の文脈でよく使われます。比喩的な意味では冗長で退屈なという意味で使われ、文章やスピーチが難解で大げさでつまらない状態を表し、アカデミックな論文やビジネス文書などで過度に装飾された文章を批判するときに使われます。
We were slow with it. It was a bit turgid. We were slow with it. It was a bit turgid. We were peppering the kind of 18-yard box.
ペッパーは一般的にはもちろん胡椒ですが、動詞として使う場合は小さなものをたくさん降り注ぐ、散りばめる、連続して攻撃するという意味になります。スポーツ、会話、ビジネスなど様々な文脈で使われます。
Peppering the kind of 18-yard box. Peppering the kind of 18-yard box into Adam Webster. Okay, so
It's easier said than done. は、言うは安く行うは形という意味の英語のことわざです。何かを実行するのは簡単に言えても、実際にやるのは難しいということを表し、日常会話やビジネスシーンでよく使われるフレーズです。
With Adam Webster. Okay, so it's easier said than done, of course. It's such a stark contrast to 15, 25 years ago.
スタークは、はっきりした、厳しい、殺風景なという意味を持つ形容詞で、特に対比が明確である、非常に強調された状態と表すときによく使われ、シンプルながらも強い印象を与える単語です。ビジネス、ニュース、学術論文、日常会話など幅広い場面で使われます。
It's such a stark contrast to 15, 25 years ago. It's such a stark contrast to 15, 25 years ago. You see it a lot about being a bit antagonistic.
アンタゴニスティックは敵対的な、対立する、反対するという意味の形容詞で、主に人やグループが対立した関係にあることを表すときに使われます。また、医学や生物学の分野では、拮抗する、相反するという意味でも使われます。アンタゴニストは主人公の敵の役やライバルという意味で文学や映画で使われます。
You see it a lot about being a bit antagonistic. You see it a lot about being a bit antagonistic.
いかがでしたか？三笘薫のデビューイヤーが衝撃的だったこともあって、あのシーズンよりも今シーズンの方が良いシーズンになっているのか、という質問には答えるのが難しそうでしたね。個人的には今のところ、怪我明けのシーズンで1年目のシーズンと同じレベルに戻ってきたという感じがしていますが、実際はもっとできるのが想像できるために、もっとできてたはず、もっとできるはずという期待感が膨らんでしまっているという感覚も、一概に三笘が絶好調でスーパーだと言いづらい気持ちになるところです。実際には1年目のシーズンでの7ゴール、6アシストを超える数字になってきており、現在6ゴール、3アシストという数字が、10ゴール、5アシストまでいけば最高と言えるでしょうし、実際は15ゴール、10アシストくらいできるレベルにあると期待してしまっているので、もっと頑張ってもらえるように応援したいと思います。簡単でないことはもちろんわかっていますが、それができる可能性と才能があると信じていますので、日本人を代表してプレミアリーグで歴史を作り続けていってほしいという思いで、残りのシーズンも期待し、応援しながら楽しみたいと思います。本日もご視聴いただきありがとうございました。またすぐにお会いしましょう。